Dr. Christy Harvell. My practice is called Health by Design. We're the Crazy Muscle Testers, so if you haven't stopped by our booth to get a muscle testing demonstration, come on by. We're using muscle testing as a non-invasive way to find if there's deficiencies in the body and then customize and design a clinical nutrition program that's specific to your body instead of giving a pill for a problem, kind of an idea. So today I'm going to talk to you about optimal nutrition for healthy pregnancy and then how to grow healthy kids afterwards. So I say you're in the right place. Does anybody identify as a crunchy mom?
Crunchy mom?
Yeah, you're a crunchy mom? I think you might be. So anybody who is trying to raise their children more holistically or open to natural health, yeah, see? Trying to clean out like some of the toxic body care products or using cleaner things at your home. It's okay. It's not a bad thing. There's actually Crunchy Mom groups on Facebook, so you might want to join those. The Crunchy Moms are awesome at, sharing tips and tricks, and you're going to see a lot of the people that are here as vendors that are in Crunchy Moms, will help, with some conversation. I'm in there answering things, so that's a Crunchy Mom. You're in the right place. You want to know what to eat when you're pregnant and nursing. If you have a baby or a child who has colic or you suspect food sensitivities, you're just finding that they're a lot more restrictive and you're having to get things out of the diet, or they're having, eczema or colic and reflux or ear issues, this is going to be a good talk for you guys as well. Also, if you just feel like you've done everything that you know to DIY your health or your nutrition on your own, but you're still not getting the result you would expect, this is a good talk for you. And then lastly, if you just are kind of wanting to avoid at all lengths any kind of surgery, medications, or unnecessary procedures, and thinking more proactively to just keep your body nourished and healthy and abundant, then this is going to be for you. So, my background a little bit, I've been in the field of chiropractic for 18 years, but I decided really early on to specialize in nutrition because my chiropractic patients who would come in with neck pain, back pain, headaches, and that was easy, we knew chiropractic helped that, but those same patients came with their whole symptom list of all these other things and ailments that were also going wrong in their body. And I thought, geez, if I'm a doctor, a physician, I feel like I should be able to help them with everything that they walk in, not just the structural parts of it. So, like a lot of healers, I had to go through my own health journey in order to get into this weird field of nutrition response testing. We were talking weird works. We now just embrace the weirdness because the weird things that we do or the unusual things are how we get progress with some of those cases that even traditional medicine or all the testing in the world hasn't been able to help. And that was me. When I was in my high school and undergrad years, I wasn't able to heal my body with traditional medicine, and I like to say, I was that person, like a lot of our patients, unfortunately, that were bounced around from specialist to specialist and poked and prodded, and I had every test under the sun, so I had all the, advances in technology and medicine. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And for you guys, since you're mostly women, I can tell you I had endometriosis. And that's not something that's easily detected. And it can cause a whole lot of pain and discomfort and hormone imbalances. And it took me years to get to the right answer. But the way I actually healed my body was through chiropractic and nutrition and the muscle testing technique that we're demonstrating for you today. So I'm super passionate now about helping everybody, but especially women with hormone issues, try to get to the underlying root cause of their issues, hopefully a lot sooner than I did without having to get bounced around the medical system and have all these crazy tests and lose hope, and teach you where real true health really comes from. So now I'm doing this in Jacksonville. I practiced for 12 and a half years in upstate New York. And you guys have the same problems in Jacksonville as the New Yorkers had, so I think it's a human condition. I don't think it's a location condition. Everybody's just stressed out of their minds. Okay, truth, right? So let's talk about preconception. So a lot of times in our medicine, we look at what our ancestors ate and did and what rituals they did for the women who were, menstruating and were in their fertile years, because they actually put a whole lot of focus on the women who were, you know, in their years of starting to build families and have babies. We gave them all the nutrition and all the best of everything. And like, if you think of it in today's world, now it's just kind of like pregnancy after pregnancy, and it's just kind of jammed in, and our bodies are maybe not as fed and nourished as they should be. And so now we're seeing babies born with the chronic issues that used to just not come until like people were adults. So we're seeing long-term adult issues in babies. Like, for example, babies being put on reflux medication. That reflux medication never used to be a childhood thing, and now it's kind of done more and more regularly. So that's a critical period. So in preconception, so if you think about it before you actually start trying to have a baby, what the baby needs and the mom needs are fat-soluble activators. So fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, and K. And you can get that by eating liver. How many people like a big, juicy plate of liver? Probably nobody. Nobody raised their hands. That's usually the response I get. So the cool thing is, if you're not willing to eat some of these foods that are highest in the nutrients, like organ meats, which is a lot of what our ancestors ate, you can take it in a tablet, so don't worry. You can just take it in a capsule or a pill or a tablet. But other things are fish. Fish oils, of course, are really healthy in fats. Raw milk. How many people drink raw milk? Probably nobody, but that's what our ancestors did. So there's a lot of fat-soluble vitamins that get degraded when we pasteurize our dairy products. Eggs are great, and other animal fats. So that's in preconception. So prenatals, vitamin A, D, and K2. So you need the K2 to absorb the vitamin D. Choline is a natural B vitamin that most people aren't really thinking about, but you get that from liver and egg yolks. DHA, everybody, it's kind of common, you know that, you to get like a prenatal with a DHA formula. Zinc is important, and that can come from red meat and shellfish. And then for healthy cholesterol balancing, we always were taught like cholesterol is the enemy, but cholesterol is actually a band-aid in the body. Cholesterol is only a problem when it gets out of balance. But to get good cholesterol balance, seafood, dairy foods, eggs, and meat fats. So as I start to talk about ancestral nutrition for pregnancy, what you're going to realize is it's really hard to do this vegan or vegetarian. And that's just because animal proteins and fats more closely resemble our human tissues in the body. And so it's hard to start to replace everything you need on a cellular basis with only plant material, especially during fertility. It can be done, but it's very difficult and takes a lot of diligence about knowing how to balance proper nutrients and getting whole proteins and whole fats in there. So I always want to go off the bat and tell you not all vitamins are created equally. So I think that pregnancy sometimes is the very first time that people start taking a vitamin, because it's just like kind of like a well-known fact that you should take a prenatal. So supplements are, I just like break it down like this. A supplement needs to supplement an already healthy diet and lifestyle. So you can't get all of the nutrition that your body needs just with supplements alone. So you have to eat these foods, but then the supplement or the prenatal to, you know, supplement it. But be careful of over-the-counter ones that sound like chemicals. We do a whole reading labels class, including not just foods, but reading like products like supplementation. If you see labels like this with all these words on here that sound like they were made in a chemistry lab and they're unpronounceable, I always say, like, if you see letters and numbers combined, that's not a whole food product. So the best way to shop for nutrition is to make sure it's a whole food vitamin, where they're extracting nutrients from food, because the best way is and always has been to get your nutrition through food. So there was this really cool person called Weston A. Price. Does anybody follow the Weston A. Price organization? Weston A. Price was one of the most primitive nutritionists. He was like way ahead of his time. He was one of the very first. And what he did was he studied people's teeth to see if we had nutritional deficiencies. And what he did is he compared the teeth and the skull of primitive people, like our ancestors, compared to when there was like westernization in the culture and they brought like commercial foods in. And he started seeing a direct increase in people's teeth being, that was the first time people had crooked teeth, for example. So he started following that, and what he found is that when the teeth are straight, it actually means that the body was properly constructed with all the proper building blocks and nutrients, and it got everything it needed from food. They also had good bone structure, their muscle tone was good, they were better at hearing and eyesight, their senses were better when they ate the proper nutrition, and all of the organ functions were better. And he even said like their mindset and attitude were generally better from getting proper nutrition. But that was all studied by people with straight teeth compared to crooked teeth. Do you ever think of this too? Humans are the only species that have crooked teeth. So if you look at your dog, it's very rare. There's some breeds that have those funny underbites, like win like those ugly dog contests. But your dog does not have crooked teeth most of the time. Isn't that interesting? And neither do most animals. Like you never see a horse with crooked teeth. So they found out that that started happening when our nutrition and our diet started going downhill. There's one of those little dogs. You gotta get the slide so you get the cute little pictures. One of those poor little ugly dogs. So what they found is when the teeth were crooked, that was a general sign that there was compromise in the rest of the body's nutrition. And that was because there was less room in the head for the glands to actually expand and contract and to grow appropriately. So the pituitary gland, if you guys have ever had kids that don't grow properly, they look at the pituitary because that's where growth hormone comes from. And so it just had a lot to do with the proper milking of the pituitary gland and having the bones in the right place to do that. And you guys, that happens naturally when you give birth through the vaginal canal. So babies that are born by C-section aren't getting the pituitary gland, the natural pumping mechanism that happens. So that's why you're going to hear about the benefits of chiropractic with pregnancy and infants. So especially the babies that are born by C-section, they don't have the proper things happening to the skull, and then that can set off a whole cascade of growth development issues down the road. Dr. Padilla is going to be speaking, I think, in a couple of people after me. She's going to go over more on the chiropractic part of it. And then they also found that with the, if your head wasn't in the right alignment and the bones weren't growing developmentally, it had to do with even like the ability to breathe properly and if the nasal passages stayed open. So don't we see a lot of kids with all the snotty and mucusy and congestion and all those kinds of issues? So this is part of the reason of not getting the proper nutrition even at preconception. So we're going to go from preconception to nutrition during pregnancy. And so ancient cultures actually used to wait 3 years in between pregnancies. Did you know that? So they always waited 3 years so the mom could completely heal and recover in between each pregnancy and then refuel her body and start eating some of these things like the liver and the organ meats that we don't eat in today's culture to prepare the womb and her immune system and everything to support a healthy baby. So in the first trimester, we talk about the prenatal, so make sure it's a good whole food with those healthy fats in it like A, D, K, and DHA. In the second trimester, the minerals become important because the baby's skeleton is really starting to grow, so you've got to help that osseous structure develop. We use omegas, so that's for the brain and neurological development of the baby, and omegas are just naturally anti-inflammatory. Because of the nature of just the baby taking up space, you guys know reflux becomes an issue. So we start to focus on digestive support in the second trimester, and then also blood sugar support. So we don't like those glucose tolerance tests. Does anybody like those glucose tests? I know most of our practice is on like low carb, low sugar, and then they go and have this test done, and they're like, of course it's gonna cause the body stress. That's what they're doing, is just testing how well your body recovers from the stress of having a big sugar load. So then we move on to the third trimester, and it becomes about iron because your circulation doubles during pregnancy, which is pretty amazing. So that's where the iron comes in. We don't want to give it too early because it can be linked to constipation. But we use the whole food iron. So usually when we use the whole food iron, it's a lot easier and gentler on the digestive system. It shouldn't really be causing the constipation that often goes along with it. And then we focus on adrenal support. So if you've been by my booth, you probably had your adrenals cause a crashed out muscle test. That's because we're all stressed. But the adrenals are so important leading up to labor and delivery, because your adrenal is your endurance. And so we don't want the body using up its stress hormones on just everyday thing. We want the adrenal to be rested and ready to get you through that endurance race that labor and delivery really is. And so some of our mamas, we even have them chew adrenal support during labor to help give them energy. And then what we know is if mama's adrenals are supported, it actually helps the baby's adrenals, but it actually can prevent postnatal depression. So that's important to keep mama's moods regulated and hormones as well. Excuse me. I've been shouting over the crowd all morning. And then we have a good whole food multivitamin from Standard Process, which is called Catalin. When we use B12 or folic acid. Okay, so does anybody know the debate on folic acid versus folate? So mamas always were supposed to take folic acid. That was a known thing. It was in every prenatal. And then I think a few years ago they came out like folate is toxic. You can't take it. It can cause all these issues and, you know, problems with the baby and neurological development issues. So folate is the generic name for a type of B vitamin, but it's found naturally in foods. So folate is the good one. Folic acid is a man-made version. It's sold as a supplement and it's used in fortified foods, but it's actually synthetic. So that is what we're talking about. So sometimes people have read these reports and then they get worried when we're giving them folate. Just know the difference. A whole food folate is fine. Folic acid is the synthetic toxic one. Okay, so going on with diet for a pregnant woman. When you get the slides, it's going to tell you how much cod liver oil you should be using. It's going to have a recommendation for whole fat milk, so you get all those fat-soluble vitamins. It's going to tell you to do 4 tablespoons of grass-fed butter daily, and then 2 or more eggs. You want to make sure the eggs are like pasture-raised. So a good way for you to know if the egg yolks have enough of the fats and the fat-soluble vitamins like A, they should be like almost orange. So if you see a conventional egg and it's kind of pale yellow, that doesn't have any of the vitamins, because the eggs are only as healthy as whatever the chickens ate. Let's move on to talk about vitamin A toxicity. That's an issue that has been kind of ingrained in women. Don't take vitamin A. It's toxic during labor and delivery and breastfeeding times and pregnancy times. But again, that would be if it's the synthetic type of vitamin A. So those things can become toxic really easily. And the other thing is when you see synthetic vitamins, usually they are mega dose. So vitamin A toxicity, you don't have to worry. You would have to eat gobs and gobs and gobs of vitamin A or vitamin A containing foods for it actually to become a toxicity. So you really don't have to worry. But again, if you read a supplement label and you see on the back like the recommended daily allowance and it says like 1,000%, you'll see this with B12 a lot. Because B12 will make you feel energized. So they'll put like 50,000% of the international units for what you're supposed to get in a whole day. 50,000%, not 100, 50,000, so that you feel like perked up and you're like, oh, this vitamin's really helping me. Well, like you don't need 50,000%, you only needed 100%, or maybe a little bit more than 100%. So be careful about the synthetics and look at the labels there too. If you take the A and D in the proper ratios also, they won't become synthetic, or they won't become toxic, excuse me. Okay, so morning sickness is kind of an interesting thing. Has anybody had morning sickness? Yeah, it stinks, right? So the theory was that your digestive system would become really sensitive during pregnancy, because if you were to ingest something that could potentially be fatal or toxic to the baby, that your body would say, hey, this isn't good, and prevent you from eating it. The problem is, like, a lot of our diets have toxic synthetic ingredients in them, and so the body is kind of still having this issue with the morning sickness, because there's things in there that you might not know, because it's so complicated to know what exactly is in the food items if they're not just whole foods. But the old theory was that it was because of hormone levels, and the progesterone would relax the stomach and intestines. But the new theory is that it's actually been an evolved trait that's come to protect the mom from the toxins. And it's not a pathology or something to worry about unless you're not able to take in proper nutrition. If mom is losing weight, then we really need to look at that. but sometimes it's just handled by improving the actual chemistry of the stomach, like the acidity. So apple cider vinegar is one of those things that's counterintuitive. Like people think, oh, you know, citrus and apple cider vinegar are acidic. I don't want to take those if I have reflux. But it actually can be helpful. Those things actually balance out the pH of the gut so that the body isn't going into like a hyperproduction mode of trying to make its own acid, because that causes some of the reflux too. So a solution would be to eat more cholesterol-rich foods. We talked about some of the cholesterol-rich foods, which are usually animal products. Ox bile is a supplement. So again, if you're not willing to eat some of these gross things that our ancestors ate, right? Although oxtail, some cultures tell me that's like the best thing on the planet. I've never had it. Have you had it? This is really healthy. So if you like it, this is a great time to get some. Taking bitters. There's cultures that in Sweden, they drink bitters before every single meal to get the digestive acids going and prepare for the food so that when you do eat the food, then your body can digest it better. Okay, we got a couple more minutes. So we're going to talk about proper weight gain. So they used to tell mamas to just eat enough to gain, you know, you're eating for two, used to be the theory. Well, that's not the case anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. But normal to gain about 25 to 35 pounds and to err on the high side, because 8 of that is the baby. The placenta weighs 2 to 3 pounds. The amniotic fluid weighs 2 to 3 pounds, and then an increase in breast tissue is another 2 to 3 pounds. Then remember I told you that your circulation and blood volume doubles? So that's another up to 4 pounds. So that is where all those pounds are going. So you should not be in a diet or be trying to like keep your carbs down. This is a time where your body knows what it needs, unless you're eating like unclean fast food stuff. If you're eating the foods that we're talking about and you're naturally gaining, you're okay. I'm going to leave the pregnancy adjusting up to Dr. Padilla. So let's go over infants and lactation real quick, and then we've got our next speaker lined up for you guys. So the immune system, the babies get the mom's immune system for at least 2 to 3 months. So that's why it's critical to breastfeed and for the mom to maintain all these healthy fats in the diet for those 2 to 3 months. Moms need to know too, food elimination is kind of tricky. So you can have a food sensitivity, or the baby could have a food sensitivity anywhere from seconds of eating a food or the baby breastfeeding up to 96 hours later. So it's kind of hard to know, like, if you have a sensitivity, what it was in relationship to. So we can help in our office. We muscle test the food sensitivities for the mama and the baby so that you don't have to guess and go through this rigorous. Like, what I find is, like, when babies are colicky, mamas tend to be over-restrictive, and we need to make sure you have balance. There are donor milk programs too. If you need help with that, we can give you some suggestions. Sleep is super important. And then this is when we would use a probiotic or some enzymes for gut health, because then the baby's going to get the mama's good gut health to start to build its own immune system. So that becomes a priority. For lactation, mammary PMG, we have a supplement that's actually for breast support, and fenugreek. So fenugreek kind of smells like licoricey. Those will help with milk production. And it's actually pretty helpful. Magnesium and organically bound minerals are important. And then if the baby was born by C-section, a probiotic is critical, because when the baby is born vaginally, the natural way, they also, not only does it milk the pituitary gland, like I was telling you earlier, but it also is where the baby ingests and engulfs the mom's microbiome. So if they're born C-section, they definitely need it. And there's some docs that even do like a nasal swab and throat swab to introduce cultures into the baby right away. Okay, and that was on to toddlers, so we'll have to pick up there. You guys have all the slides, but I'm going to get out of the way so your next speaker can prepare. You are a great audience. Don't forget healthbydesignfl.com.